Welcome everyone to the November 20th, 2012 Shakopee City Council meeting. Ms. Weckman, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Clay?
Here.
Councilor Whiting?
Here.
Councilor Lehman?
Here.
Councilor Sherman? Here. Mayor Tapke?
Here. All stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda this evening?
Staff has none.
Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Councilor Whiting.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second by Councilor Clay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 4, consent business. Are there any items to remove from the consent agenda? Councilor Clay.
Can we take out 4F6?
Yep. Any others? Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, I'll move the consent agenda as modifying, removing 4F6.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Whiting. Mr. McNeil, would you please read the consent agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 4A1 approves an agreement with Northland Business Systems to provide support for the police digital dictation system at a cost of $2,627.96. 4A2 declares several firearms held by the Shakopee Police Department to be surplus property and authorizes properly disposal. 4A3 declares 2 forfeited vehicles held by the police department to be surplus property and authorizes proper sale or disposal of these vehicles. 4B1 authorizes the purchase of 1 new street sweeper from McQueen Equipment, Inc. in the amount of $214,507.74 to be paid from the Surface Water Enterprise Fund. 4B2 authorizes the purchase of boxes, hoists, and other truck accessories, including setup, from Towmaster Truck Equipment in the amount of $221,717.08 to be paid from the Capital Equipment Internal Service Fund. 4C1 authorizes appropriate city officials to enter into an administrative services agreement with Alliance Benefit Group for services relating to employee flexible spending accounts and health savings accounts. 4C2 and 4 acknowledges the successful completions of initial probationary periods of employment for mechanic Jesse Wilson and accountant Melissa Schlingman and grants him full-time employment regular status. 4C3 acknowledges the successful 6-month probationary period of employment for Fred Roddy and grants him full-time regular status as sergeant in the Shakopee Police Department. 4C5 authorizes the hiring of Kristen Holtz as communications coordinator at Step E, Grade 6 of the 2012 non-union pay plan, subject to successful completion of pre-employment screenings. 4C6 accepts with regret the resignation of Lisa Jurison from her position as Public Works Secretary effective November 28, 2012. 4D1 adopts resolution number 7252, accepting the work of Chard Tiling and Excavating, Inc. on the Green Meadows Park improvements and authorizes final payment. 4D2 authorizes resolution number 7253, accepting the donation of batting cages from the Shakopee Youth Baseball Association and Shakopee School District. 4E1 adopts resolution number 7251, setting a public hearing date for December 18, 2012 to consider the vacation of a portion of the public right-of-way of platted Jefferson Street north of 3rd Avenue West. 4F1 authorizes payment of bills and electronic transfers in the amount of $1,129,455.67. 4F2 approves the minutes of the City Council meeting of October 30th, 2012. 4F3 authorizes the appropriate city officials to renew the city's Laserfish software assurance program in an amount not to exceed $20,405 to be paid from the IT fund. 4F4 approves the application of and grants a massage therapy business license to J&M Mokel LLC, doing business as iZen Spas, and approves the applications of and grants massage therapist licenses to Victoria Vandriesch and Carrie Fear. 4F5 adopts resolution number 7249, approving work comp coverage for Shakopee City elected officials through the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, and 4F6 was removed from consent agenda.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 5, recognition of involved citizens by City Council. Anyone out there tonight who'd like to speak on an item not on the agenda? All right, moving on to item number 6, public hearing, renewal of 2013 currency exchange licenses. Entertain a motion to open public hearing. Councilor Clay?
Move to open the public hearing. Second.
Seconded by Counselor Sherman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
The public hearing is now open.
Public hearing is now open.
Be a brief
Whoever wants to
presentation.
talk.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is the adoption of the resolution number 7250, approving the application of Madison Financial Companies and DRM LLC of Shakopee for the granting of a currency exchange license. These are annual items that come before the council requiring a public hearing. These are two businesses in Shakopee, one known as Money Exchange, the other one as XL Pawn. There were 3 licenses granted last year. This year, only 2 come forward, and we ask your approval of the attached resolution number 7250.
Any questions for Ms. Linehan? Anyone in the audience like to speak in the public hearing? All right, seeing none, Counselor Clay.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Whiting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Counselor Whiting.
I'll offer resolution number 7250, a resolution approving the application of Madison Financial Companies doing business as Money Exchange and DRM LLC of Shakopee doing business as XL Pawn for a currency exchange license and move its adoption.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Counselor Lehman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you all. Item number 7, business removed consent agenda 4F6. Counselor Clay.
Yeah, this is to move the first meeting from Tuesday the 1st to Wednesday. Wednesdays are, typically have been set aside for church activity nights. Is there any chance we could make this the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of the month, Tuesday of the month in January? Or does that create major problems?
We would have to take a look at what else is scheduled for the council chambers. If you want to come back to this, we can address this later in the meeting, and that way you'll know what would have to be moved if that was the case.
Counselor Lehman?
Could we just go to Thursday instead?
That's planning commission night normally. So I don't know what's on the agenda at that point.
All right. Do we want to just postpone it tonight, or do we want to come back at the next meeting?
No, just give us 5 minutes if you want to go into the next one, and we can address this.
Okay.
Let's move the table.
Second.
Move to table by Counselor Clay, seconded by Counselor Whiting. Any discussion?
Motion to table and not discuss, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We will get back to 4F6. All right. Entertain a motion to recess for Economic Development Authority meeting. Councilor Lehman,
Motion to recess to Economic Development Authority meeting.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Sherman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We are recessed for Economic Development Authority meeting. President Clay.
Which I will call the meeting of November 20th, 2012, the Economic Development Authority to order. Secretary, if you please make note of the roll, we appreciate that.
Yep.
Next item would be approval of the agenda. Any changes, Ms. Sherman?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion by Sherman, seconded by Mr. Lehman. Discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Mr. Whiting,
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from October 16th, 2012.
motion to approve the minutes by Mr. Whiting, seconded by Ms. Sherman. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Fourth item would be bills in the amount of $199.80 to the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe Anyone need any discussion on what that bill was
One
for?
question.
Mr. Whiting?
Thank you, Mr. President. The agenda says 199.80 and the item number 10 says 175. What am I missing?
Is the second one for 35 down below?
$23.99 is what you're missing.
Okay, good job. Thanks. Okay,
Mr. Mayor?
I see.
Or, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
It should be $175. The bill on the agenda is incorrect.
Thank you.
Mr. Lehman?
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the bills in the amount of $175 even for Chamber of Commerce.
Motion by Lehman, seconded.
Second.
I'm gonna go with the mayor this time. Seconded by Tabke. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The bills are approved. Payment of the bills are approved. Last item would be consideration of amendments for contract for private development between City of Shakopee and All Saints Senior Living of Shakopee LLC.
Thank you, members of the EDA. You will recall earlier this year that the EDA and the City Council approved a contract for private development for the All Saints Senior Living Facility. That's also on the council agenda this evening. At the time of that approval of contract for private development for tax increment financing for housing purposes, the project proposed 80 total units. The developer has increased that to 84. That necessitates an amendment to the contract for private development between the EDA, the City Council, and the developer, and so you are asked in Resolution 7256 to approve that first amendment to the contract for private development. In addition, the project developer is seeking finance or has put in place financing with Tradition Capital Bank, and they are requesting that the city approve a pledge of tax increment receipts against the financing for the project, and so you're also asked in that resolution to consent to the pledge of that tax increment note between All Saints and Tradition Capital Bank. So in other words, that tax increment that's available for the project would be pledged against the financing for the project that the developer has entered into. So if you have questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. We've got representatives of All Saints as well here, so.
So that pledge would be the second to the last whereas on of the resolution?
It's actually the last declarative cause, or second to the last and the last, whereas to secure
Okay.
the payment, and the developer has requested the city and authority execute an acknowledgement and consent to the pledge agreement. And as I noted, this item will also be on the council agenda later on this evening. So you have one report to cover it.
Any questions? Any more questions for staff? Mr. Lehman?
Two questions, Mr. President. The first is, what necessitated the change from 80 to 84?
I will ask the project developers to answer the question for you.
Okay. Second would be the amount that's being pledged toward the financing. That dollar amount is,
The note, as I recall, is on the order of $1 million. I'd have to go back to the CPD, but it's on that order in terms of the tax increment proceeds available for this project.
all right, so then I have a third question, Mayor,
Go ahead.
President. Does the city then have a financial position on this property? Not
The
unlike,
city does not. The contract for private development defines the relationship between the city, the EDA, and the city council, and essentially what that relationship is that the city has agreed to provide increment to help fund certain improvements. Of course, if they don't meet the obligation to fund those improvements, then the city has recourse. But it's not a mortgage position per se. Essentially, the city and the EDA are foregoing growth in the tax increment for the period of that tax increment district.
Chairman, the reason I asked is on block 3 and 4 down here, we're second listed on the mortgage on the
On
property.
blocks 3 and 4, that's because the city was in a specific role in the development of that project and provided a financial guarantee related to that project. We're not doing that as a city in this case. We're simply foregoing a certain amount of identified tax increment to finance the improvements.
Okay,
You're on a roll.
yeah, so the building gets built. For some odd reason, it doesn't happen. We have an empty building sitting there. Let's say it financially fails. The city has committed money that it has not, future dollars, in the tune of $1 million.
The city has not, because this is done as a pay-as-you-go or pay-go tax increment financing. So if the obligations are not met under the contract for private development, the city doesn't have an ongoing future obligation to forego any of that tax increment if they've not met the obligations of the contract for private development.
I guess I don't know how we would be able to go back and say, okay, they're not meeting the requirements, therefore they're not eligible for this, but they've already used this as collateral for the
It's
loan.
used on an annual basis. Essentially, it is like a tax abatement in that because it's annual, it is paid out to them on an annual basis. So let's assume that there are some obligations that are left outstanding on the part of the developer. Then future increment would not be made available. They would have benefited from the past increment so long as they complied with the contract for private development.
But aren't they using the total increment amount up front?
No, they're not.
That would be the old
City
style
attorney
tip
wishes to weigh in.
from 20 years ago.
He's got his hand up over. You got it?
Well, Mr. Chair, maybe the question's been answered, but this is not, in previous days, it wasn't uncommon for EDAs to actually pay all the money up front, get a note back, and the developer would get the $1 million if that what it is up front, and it would be paid back over the life of the tax increment district through the increment. That's becoming more and more rare. That's not what this is. This is just a pay-as-you-go note. If the project generates the increment it's supposed to, they get it on an annual basis. If they're not in compliance with any terms of the agreement or it's not generating sufficient tax increment, they just won't get the payment. So it's not a matter where the city upfronts or the EDA upfronts the money and gets it paid back. It's
Okay.
pay-as-you-go.
All right, that's all the questions I had.
Any other questions for staff?
Does this affect the number of low-income units going from 80 to 84, or does that still stay at 16, I believe it was?
Because of the requirements of the TIF district, I think the number changes slightly by 1 or
17.
2. Yep.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Roger Fink. I'm representing the applicant, Trident Development, tonight. And I know a question was raised this evening about why the change from 80 units to 84. So I'm here to try to answer that question, as well as any other questions that you might have. As we started our architectural design of the building, we did have 80 in mind. But if you recall, we started this process many, many, many months ago, especially back when we were initially talking about the business assistance application. Our market information, our study, our analysis showed a much greater demand than simply 80 units. But as we got into the architectural design of the building itself, organized the elements, the units, the common areas, we found there was more building area there than would accommodate 80 units. So we were able to add 4 more units within that same building configuration, and felt that was the most efficient way to go about our architectural design. So it was partially to meet market demand, partially to fit within our design development efforts with the building design. If I may also interject regarding the use of the TIF, just to be clear, our agreement with the city requires us to pay all of the costs of those eligible costs up front out of our pocket, hence some of the financing we have. Further, until we demonstrate to the city that we have spent all those costs and all those improvements are installed and certify to those expenses to the city's satisfaction, only then does the city sign the TIF note. Only then does that agreement actually come into play, so that the TIF payments can begin to flow after we start making our payments. So we put all the money up front out of our pocket, and then we are reimbursed through the TIF payments over time. Should there come a time where either the TIF increment payment from the city to the bank in this case is less than or non-existent, regardless of the loan obligation we have with Tradition Bank, we, the borrower, are still obligated for that entire amount, not the city. And so I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Questions for Mr. Fink? Seeing none,
Okay, thank you.
motion might be in order. Yeah, let's let the mayor do it.
All right. Offer and pass, offer resolution number 12-8 approving the First Amendment to the CPD between the City of Shakopee EDA for the City of Shakopee and All Saints Senior Living of Shakopee LLC, and the consent to the pledge of tax increment note between All Saints and Tradition Capital Bank.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Mr. Tabke, seconded by Mr. Whiting. Discussion. Discussion, anybody? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries with Mr. Lehman in dissent. Item 6, if there's nothing else. Ms.
I'll make a
Sherman?
motion to adjourn to, it's actually Tuesday, December 4th at 7 PM.
Motion to adjourn to December 4th. Seconded by
Second.
Mr. Tabke. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We reconvene the City Council meeting. Item number 10D1, concept plan approval for parcel 75 Park. Ms. Polly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm bringing this forward to you tonight for discussion and direction as far as moving forward. Part of our park planning process that we adopted earlier this year was that the park board, and in this case the EAC, review the concept plans for a park, make a recommendation, and have discussion on it, and then it comes to the city council for your approval of that concept plan. From there, then, we would take it out to the neighborhoods not just the neighborhoods, but the community in this case for input on this park. So a little bit of background on parcel 75 is the city got ownership of parcel 75, I believe at the end of 2010, if not early in 2011, after years and years of wanting to acquire this property. Parcel 75 is located in the Southbridge area. It's bordered on the east and west by development, on the north by 169 and Southbridge Parkway. I can show you an aerial of it right here. For those in the community that don't know where this is considered parcel 75. It's just a little over 50 acres in total. It does have Southbridge Parkway going through it, so it's about 36 acres, I believe, on the north side. I have it on a different one. I believe it's 30-some acres on the north side, with about 10 acres on the south side. So we've looked at different things that we wanted to do with this property. Back in 2001, there was a Southbridge master plan that was put together with the overall development of the area. This is kind of hard to read because of all the writing on it, but this shows the whole Southbridge area. In it, it did include some plans for parcel 75 as far as if we did ever acquire that property, what we would put there. And I know you can't see it very well on this microscopic image, but and ideas for it were trails all around. It's a oak savanna the site is made up of, with some sandy soils. It's very sandy out there if you've walked the site at all. Originally, the concept plan was to put a tennis court over here, or a hockey rink, a parking lot, and then this is a band shell. My finger is bigger than the band shell. And then a ball field, and then possible sites for the future third fire station. So this is kind of what we went off of. Things have changed over time. Also reading the City of Shakopee, the Department of Natural Resources, MnDOT, and Xcel Energy came up with a vegetation, sorry.
Black fungus vegetation.
I've been too close. Hold on. It will come. There we go. A vegetation management plan for the site.
Wow.
Made you all dizzy there. In this vegetation management plan, it talks specifically, it's a very thorough plan about what the site is made up of, what is there as far as vegetation, wildlife, what can be done with it to manage it, to keep it thriving as an oak savanna. It's one of the last oak savannas that we have in the area. Like I said, it is very sandy soil, but the vegetation management plan has shown that there are plants, native plants that are on the site. There's native trees that we want to try to preserve, but it also, and backing up one second, it also does say too that there's some special species out there. They're not extinct and they're not endangered, but they're sensitive species, and that's the gopher snake and a prairie mouse. So they do live on the site. But looking at this plan, it really shows what we should have been doing from this 2005 plan up to 2010 and where we would be at. And a lot of it has to do with the buckthorn removal, replanting of some of the native prairie areas, trying to manage the recreational uses of it, and just preserving the natural area of it, but also using it for what we would like to. One of the agreements that we have in taking this property is that it will remain for public use. That's the agreement we signed when we got it from MnDOT. So we brought it to the Park Board and the EAC back in May, and they saw a couple of different concept plans for that. And I have the original concept plan that they saw showed one of the items that has come up for discussion quite a bit to where we put in the city. And this has been an area that we've looked at, but without the city owning it, we've never moved forward. And it is a dog park, and where a dog park might fit within the city limits. We used to have a dog park group that was active for many years. It hasn't been active now since about 2008 because we didn't have sites that were able to be looked at. Everything we had looked at couldn't be developed. So since we acquired this site, this is one area that we thought we could possibly look at putting a dog park. We have high voltage power lines going north and south across the property, and then they're all going east and west across the southern part of the property. So staff looked at this. We thought we could put a dog park underneath the power lines and a little bit into the wooded area on the west of that property. They saw this also with the hockey rink. The closest hockey rink to this area of town will be the new one that's put in Riverside Fields Park on the south side of 21. There's not really a good trail connection to get there, so it would be driving. We have a high density of children in this area, and one of the major requests we've had from the residents of Southbridge has been a hockey rink, and we just haven't had a spot to put it in. The parks we do have out there are fairly small. We have Savannah Oaks Park and Hamlet, and they're on the smaller side of the neighborhood park. And then, of course, we did keep an area where we thought the third fire station could eventually go in the future. With that, we added emergency access. Would be an emergency access road only, not a through road that would go to this cul-de-sac that the neighbors over here on the east side, they don't have a second entrance in and out, so the fire department highly desires this emergency access. We'd have trails throughout. Parking lot would be separate from the fire station because we don't, as we saw with Lions Park, we don't want to mix the two parking lots together. So this is what they originally saw. The discussions from the park board and the EAC obviously were different. The park board is looking at the recreational portion of it. The EAC is looking at the natural resources portion of it. But ultimately, they came to a vote of 8-3. We had 11 people of the 12, I had to do math there, of 12 total. We have 7 on the park board and 5 on the EAC. So one wasn't there. We had 8-3 vote to go ahead with a concept plan including the dog park, a parking lot, a hockey rink, and trails on this site, in addition to keeping a place for a 3rd fire station. But with that, they wanted staff to come back with possibility of putting that hockey rink on the south side of Southbridge Parkway, because this is where some of the native prairie is found. And so to try to do less disturbance on that front side, we looked. I walked this site with other city staff. We did quite a bit of different areas in the whole Southbridge areas to try to figure out where that hockey rink could go. I talked with our park maintenance department, and we came up with this plan as far as this is the only place we felt the rink could go because of the high wire lines, and you have to light a hockey rink because of the darkness getting dark so early in the winter. It needed to be pushed as closest to Southbridge Parkway as possible, and now even if it's here, we could only light it on that north side because we can't have the high poles underneath the power lines to a certain distance. Park maintenance did not like this layout at all, because when we do any type of athletic field, we like them to go north and south because of the sun, especially when you make ice. Now, we don't have a conclusion right now whether this would be blacktop or turf hockey rink, but no matter what, if it goes east and west, it's very hard to make ice, so it's a lot of additional time. You don't usually have good quality ice because of the sun, so they would prefer it north and south. Well, walking and doing all the measurements, the only place then we could put it is back on that north side, north and south, which you see in the plans here. So this is what was discussed with the park board. With this, as we walked the site, we also came up with the idea that we could not only put the dog park on the north side, but there's a possibility that the dog park could fit on the south side, and this is the whole concept plan of changing, just using most of that north side. This would put the dog park on the south side. It's a little under 10 acres on that side. If you have the hockey rink, take out the hockey rink and move it back, you have a little over 10 acres on that south side. A benefit to the south side is that you can't really do much else with that other than have trails on the south side because of those high wire power lines that we have running through there. Another benefit of it is that we would install a fence around our whole property. We have quite a few of encroachments in this area that we've been trying to work on, but putting our own fence with the dog park would eliminate those encroachments into our parkland. It also would give a benefit to some of the homeowners that don't currently have a fence. If they ever wanted to put a fence, the city's paying for that back property fence that we would put posts in that they could easily hook up to in the future. A downside of it is it borders 21 homes. There's not a lot of trees to do a barrier between the dog park and those homes. And because it is so open, even for people who want to walk their dogs, it's kind of boring, I guess, to some people, because it only has a little bit of rolling hills. It's not flat by any means, so it's a nice walk, but there's not a lot of cover, really, aesthetics, I guess, to that property. So that was an idea to put on the north side or south side. Putting it back on the north side, we were able to make it a little bit bigger. We've walked the site. There's a lot of buckthorn and honeysuckle and invasive species throughout there. We think that by doing some management of the forest and taking a lot of that out, we're going to open up where we can install a fence without taking any significant nice trees. We would be able to do that with taking out the invasive species. And we got to just a little over 7 acres, so it's bigger than that 5 acre that we had found during the dog park group investigation, that you want at least a 5 acre or bigger park to make it a nice dog park. So putting it back on the north side, benefits of this is that you have a natural tree buffer behind the homes on the west and the dog park. We wouldn't look at going into those trees at all. We keep the fence on the east of those trees. There's 17 homes on this side versus the 21 on the south side. It keeps everything on the north side as far as parking lot, trails. You're not having people cross the streets to do different trails. It incorporates the prairie underneath the power lines that we can't use, along with some wooded area, so you give people a little bit more of scenery, I guess, when they're walking through there. But then we could also have different gates where they can go out and have their animals on a leash throughout the rest of the park. Dogs are allowed in all of our parks on a leash, so that would be no different walking through here. So the park board recommended the plan that, or a concept of the plan that you see in front of you tonight. We have two different, a concept A and a concept B. I'm bringing both the north and the south side forward to you tonight because out of the park board, they couldn't make a decision on whether they wanted it north or south. They were split. Out of the 7 members, 3 wanted it north, 3 wanted it south, and 1 voted no to both. So we didn't get an actual recommendation for the location of the dog park. However, as unanimously, they did say that they want a dog park at the site. They're recommending a dog park at the site. They're recommending trails. They're recommending the hockey rink back on the north side of the site. And they're recommending the dog park, trails, and the hockey rink. So both concepts is for your discussion tonight, is whether you think the north side or the south side, or neither. I guess this is where the city council weighs in on what you think of our concept plans. From the EAC, though, they didn't make a recommendation. I took this back to the EAC at their last meeting for them to weigh in on, because we are now putting that hockey rink back on the north side per park board recommendation. So I wanted to get their input. They had made a decision on, in their July meeting, not to go ahead with an environmental impact study because of some funding. We have $7,000 in our Rancho Resources plan. The impact study is about 10, so we'd have to find the 3,000 elsewhere. But also, they felt at that time that this was going in an already disturbed area. Where those power lines are, it's already disturbed, so they didn't feel that it was worth spending the money to do another impact study when we've already disturbed that area. Now, when I took this back to them at the last meeting, there was different discussion, and they still felt that an environmental impact study would be beneficial. So they wanted me to bring that forward as a recommendation to the city council, that you consider, if you think environmental impact study is important, that we have that done prior to then going to the community on this. As I said in my memo, because of the management plan that was put together in 2005, there has been significant environmental, I guess that we've looked at the environmental aspects of the property very closely, compared it to different registries of what the species are out there, the wildlife. We have a lot of work to do out here. We have a lot of management of the invasive species, so we have to go take that out no matter what. There is some prairie out there, but it's very minimal. So no matter what we do, we are going to have to restore the prairie. So whether we put a hockey rink there and restore the prairie on the rest of the site, you know, either way, we're not really disturbing a beautiful prairie, because there's a lot of maintenance that has to be done with it. As far as the management plan talks about many burns that we have to do, a reestablishment. It's going to take quite a few years to get this to the natural resource piece that we want it to be. But it is an option. Like I said, I do have about $7,500 in our natural resource budget to put towards an environmental study. The one I got a quote for the environmental study, it was $10,200. So I would need another little less than $3,000 to do that. And we could take that out of, we could do this in 2013, we could do it out of the general fund, that sort of thing too, for discussion. So I guess I can stop talking and open up to questions for the city council to weigh in on what you think of these concept plans and where you'd like us to go.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Councilor Sherman.
I like all the work that you've done on this, and I appreciate having a couple of different options to look at. As I look at it and being familiar with the area, to me the concept A makes the most sense in having the dog park on the north side, with that, particularly that natural tree barrier between the homes and the dog park, whereas on the south, you don't have that. I mean, it's pretty much would be wide open. So that's why I would prefer that north option with the dog park in the north side versus the south. And then as far as the environmental study, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of work to do there in terms of invasive species and restoring of the prairie anyway. So I'm not really convinced that spending that $10,000 is the best use of our funds, knowing that all the study that you've done and walking through the area and understanding what needs to happen there. So I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Councilor Lehman.
Well, it would appear that the distance on Concept A North between the dogs and the residence is much larger than the southern option. So I guess from that standpoint, I'd hate to put a bunch of barking dogs right behind a bunch of people's houses. So
No bark sign.
well, yeah. Actually, we could find them if they bark and make a buck. So I guess I would, if we're gonna go with the dog park, I'd put it on the north too. The fencing that is the orange lines on the north, is that the dog park fenced in area?
The yellow is actually the dog park fence. The orange is the trails that we would put. We would put trails in that would either be probably pea gravel or wood chip, so that we try to keep people on the trails. Now dogs obviously run wherever they want to, but you want to put the trails in so you tell people where to go. But the orange is the trails, the yellow is the fence.
Okay. And then, how do we, how do you keep two dogs from fighting?
That's up to the owner. We would put in place, if we did a dog park in here, and any dog park you go to has dog park rules for people to follow. We'd post them at the entranceway. I've got a couple of I don't bring them with me, but I took a couple pictures. We went and toured some of the Three Rivers Park District and some other city dog parks. So we would set rules and procedures that we would post. We would also probably look at, one of the things the park board talked about is if we did a dog park, looking at if we wanted to charge a fee. A lot of the dog parks you go to have a daily fee that you can use or a seasonal fee. And the license of the dogs is required and everything also.
Okay, and then, as far as environmental impact, the only impact would be the post holes for the fence, the people walking on the trails, and the dogs. It's not like we're gonna dig down and put footings in to build a big building or something. So I don't see the need for that at this point, unless some major structure is gonna go on there, which I don't see that happening.
No, the question of whether we pave or unpave the hockey rink would probably be the biggest footprint if we pave it. And that would be up here, but that would be determined if we actually get to that plan of doing this and getting it the final plan for it, we would make that decision at that time.
And then the last question I have, Mayor, is the trail that loops all the way around, do you know what that distance might be? The black trail that goes all the way around on the outside?
I don't off the exact, well, it's, yeah, Mr. Engineer, it's 5,628 linear feet. You know what that is in distance?
About a mile.
About
1.2
a mile?
miles.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any benches on that northern area? If somebody wants to take a little sit down, drink their water bottle or something?
We don't have any illustrated, but we could definitely put that in a final plan.
Okay. I had one. Oh, the other comment is just a comment. In the future, when you put these maps together,
Yeah.
the yellow does not show up very good at all.
Okay. Well, yeah, and for those people that maybe
Wear
not good
glasses
with
like
colors,
myself
it could
and
be different.
the mayor and Councilor Whiting, and Mr. Clay. And
Councilor Whiting.
I also like the north plan, for all the reasons the other counselors mentioned. Also the woods, I think it's important for the dogs to get out in the woods. There's open fields for them to run. I do like the idea that there's a lot less houses that could be bothered by it. So I like the concept A north.
I agree with everybody.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know.
Today.
Mark
Mark
it
your
down.
calendar.
Exactly. I have a couple questions, Jamie. I also think it makes the most sense on the north side. Two things. One, big concern with it being on the north side is how sandy the soil is. And I do think that we need to make sure to find out before we put a dog park in there if that soil will hold up to the use. How do we go about doing that?
Well, I think I can call a couple of architects who've put together dog parks before. I know that there's one that works for WSB actually that I could call and ask them their opinion. But that I think would come in whatever trail we put on there would have to be built such so that it doesn't break down to that sand. And I think they could give me an idea of what materials that might be.
Okay.
But I will definitely make that inquiry.
Got it. Yeah. So before we move forward with it, we need to make sure that so because under the power lines. Anybody walk out there?
Yeah.
Right, if you want to-
It's very sandy,
It's-
yeah.
you like, so it crushes under your feet as you're just walking on a normal day, and I'm just concerned that as we have dogs, especially big dogs running around there, that we'll end up with a desert of sand and no vegetation at all, which doesn't make for a very good dog park. And the second thing is, you think that MnDOT would give us an easement or allow us to use the land north so we can make it bigger yet to the north? And maybe that's a Bruce question, I don't know.
Possibly.
I think that's something we could certainly check out. They want to retain ownership of that, and whether or not they would allow us to use that would be a question we'd have to ask.
Could we ask? And
Yeah, I think we can ask. We can-
There's a fence along the highway there, so it would save some fencing.
Mhm.
But yeah, just if, so it's not unused space up there, or at least trails through it or something, so that we can make sure to have public use continued for that northern, whatever.
And this is a full
acre,
5
so-
acres that they retained.
Okay, it's a full 5 acres, okay. Good. Councilor Lehman.
The portion of that is drainage, so I guess I'd ask to find out how wet it is on a wet season before we put any kind of infrastructure in there. 'Cause you might not be able to use it when it's underwater.
What's underwater there?
Well, if they're draining, using this shaded area up on the north for drainage, you know, at the wet season, it's gonna be marshy in there.
Okay,
So
very good.
Can check
find
on
out
that.
if that's the case before we plan a trail up through there.
Right,
But there's a small valley that kind of runs through the middle there.
yeah, that stays wet, okay. All right, any other questions? All right, Jamie, so what kind of further direction do you need from us tonight?
Just direction that if the council, or a motion, I guess, that the council is comfortable with concept A, to direct staff to, the first thing I would do is probably regroup the dog park, citizen dog park group that we've had, get them up to speed on this, and then we would hold a couple of neighborhood or community meetings for their input on this plan, and then I would bring it back to you with any comments that they have or any changes that we might have that come out of that. So I guess just your blessing to move forward with this and bring it to the community.
Perfect. Councilor Clay?
So this is the first park that we've developed since we had that powwow a while back about the new process we were going to be using for park development. And this is step one, bringing the
Well,
concept plan to the council first, and then,
yes, I mean, we did have Quarry Lake, but we're not to that development. I brought that to you last meeting. But this is probably more realistic to get developed sooner, so it's going beyond the concept phase now. So this would be the first park that we would, yes, it's going to Park Board and EAC, it's now coming to City Council. Then we go out to the community for input.
and then the next step after that is,
Then I bring it back to the Park Board and the City Council with the input from the community to see if there's any changes that need to be made. And then a recommendation we brought back to you with those changes, if any, for a final approval of the concept plan with the then what I would bring to you too is the request to move forward to get a final plan drawn up. And I think we could maybe do some of this in-house, some of it we may have to hire an architect for. That's what I'll have to talk with Mr. Loney about. And based on the sandy soils, if we would need anybody further to look at it. But I would bring that back to you to get the final concept plan before we go out to bid and construction of it.
Because we have this in the CIP for 2013, right? The dog park portion?
Yes, portions of it, yep. And that's where the dog park group would come in too, because a portion of what we've allocated is what they've in the past said they could donate with in-kind and funds. So we'd want to resurrect that to see if that's still a possibility.
Councilor Lehman?
Do we know if this parking lot is gonna be large enough to serve the hockey and the dog park?
Good question.
Yes, we will make that final determination too, if this is what the plan is, we'll do those final numbers. But when I did work with Mr. Henderson of the Public Works Department, he had put numbers together, and we had talked with other communities too for dog parks and what they have. We think this will be enough because they're different seasons. I guess it depends if we pave that hockey rink and we feel that's gonna be used more in the summer as well. We might have to make that parking lot a little bit bigger, but
Does the lot on the south in this concept plan, is that included, or is that an overflow, or?
The lot on the south, or the south side would be included with concept plan A, but all we would then do on the south side and all we're proposing with concept plan is to put trails throughout that area so that we connect, if I can get the bigger side. This is a trail corridor that the city has. This trail is not in right now, but if we in the future want to get this trail in, it comes from the Red Oak Elementary School and the trails along 21 to here. I don't think we would put as many trails in here. We maybe just make a loop, maybe an adult fitness trail in there, but we would connect this trail to be able to go to this corner to cross to come over and connect that trail. Whether we put the 2 parking lots in or not will be determined at that final concept plan. This is just to show if people only wanted to come and walk, we own those areas, so we could put different locations for parking.
Work
So-
could be done years later.
So we have the ability to add or subtract parking either way.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still at the concept phase, so.
Yep.
Counselor Clay?
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion directing, or motion from council approving the concept plan A as presented tonight for parcel 75 park, and to direct staff to continue on with the next step of obtaining citizens' comments on this design prior to continuing the process back with us again.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Sherman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. I'm really excited about this one, Jamie. It'll be great for that neighborhood out there.
I'm very excited too. Hopefully we get some good feedback, and I'll let you know. I'll keep you informed of the neighborhood meetings. Also, so that if you want to attend or people call you during those times, you'll be aware.
Perfect. 10D2, facility improvement projects.
Okay. Sorry, this. Okay. This is something that's being brought to you forward tonight. Usually we put the budget improvement packages together during the budget time, and these are the larger items that are one-time budget items that we want to do or improvements that we want to do. We didn't bring a couple of these forward during the budget time because they were coming out of the park asset fund or building fund, which you're going to see a couple improvements come forward out of the building fund a little later tonight from Ms. Wilson. But these are 2 improvements that I wanted to bring forward for your discussion on of whether we move forward with. The 2 that I'm asking your input on tonight is to doing some maintenance and painting of the exterior of the community center. Over the past couple of years, we've done quite a few maintenance and upgrades to the interior of the community center, and we obviously just put a roof on the community center, but we haven't done anything to the exterior of it. And during the roof portion, the consultant did mention some of the issues we have with the caulking in between the tip-up panels, but then we also had a painter come out and give us a quote for what it would be to re-caulk between all of the panels of the community center or the walls of the community center are tip-up concrete panels, and in between each one is a joint that's filled with caulk. We do have some of the caulk is deteriorating or non-existent in some places, and then we do have some cracking on the building. The building hasn't had any maintenance to it since it was built, so it's almost going to be 18 years old now, next year, and it is getting to a point where you can just see some wear and tear. It's not that it's falling apart or anything like that, but you can see, and I have some pictures of the community center tonight that you look at. This one's a little bit hard to see, but all the blotches on the bottom is where we've been graffitied, and we don't have, with the fading of the facility over time, the paint that we have doesn't match anymore. So this is on the north side, I guess the northeast side of the building. You can see where we've painted over and gotten some graffiti off, and it's all blotchy. Then we have, oops, I'll go back this way. This is just some of the caulking. As you can see, it's pulling apart. This is almost between all of the panels that the caulking is pulling apart. This is a close-up of more of the graffiti. This is the stairway. It's the emergency stairway coming out of the walking track in the back. Every step is completely rusted, so the quote that we have would be to sandblast that rust off and repaint that and seal it. But it was painted all of the tan at one point, It's now very rusted in the back. And this is just some of the cracking. None of the cracking is very large right now on the exterior of the building, but it's a lot of hairline cracks throughout. So this is the back of the facility. This is around the ice arena, so you can see the different colors. Our proposal when we paint it would be to paint it all one color, not have our nice stripes. I think we would try to get rid of the stripes that used to be maroon and are now pink. But here's some more of the cracking, so just so that you can see the door. We would have all the doors and the frames on the exterior painted as well. More of the caulking pulling away. These are the cracks you can see up above the doors. This is on the southwest side of the building. This is the front with some more of the cracking and caulking. And then just some areas where we've had to do some patching to the drywall or to the stucco area out there too. And then our quote does also cover sandblasting and painting these metal grates in front. You can't, it's hard to see, I apologize, it's clear on my screen, but up here you can see it. We have a lot of wear on the bottom beam and then the crosses where it's just starting to rust. So we want to sandblast that off and repaint it. So, what?
Skateboarders.
Yeah, they get up that high. So that's the community center. We do have a quote right now of about $65,000, and that would do all the maintenance of the caulking. If we did go forward with this, I'd obviously obtain a second quote for the building. But that would be to fill all the cracks in the caulking and to sandblast the metal, repaint the metal, and the rest of the building. The building itself is 3,428 square feet. So, oh, no, I'm sorry. That's the pool. I know I have it on here somewhere. It's bigger than that. It's 24,497 square feet. Sorry, I was talking about the pool building, a little bit different. So the entire facility is fairly large, so the price tag is the $65,000 for the community center itself. Both of these projects we're recommending come out of our park asset fund, which is now where our building rent goes into. We'd have to do some adjustments. When you saw the park asset fund come forward, these two projects were not on it because they were larger projects, so we wanted your discussion on. So the second project that I'm bringing forward to tonight is upgrading our alarm system at the pool to a sprinkler system. It would be a dry sprinkler system. And the reason why we're bringing this forward is two reasons. One, our current system that we have a lot of issues with. We have a lot of calls for trouble signals at all hours of the night. I can guarantee we probably didn't go a weekend or two without getting a phone call the last couple of summers, and that's because the heads in there are very, very finicky to dust, to wind, and the building is somewhat open, so the wind comes through. They also have gone bad really fast. We've tried to talk to Simplex Grinnell, who is our monitoring system, about the heads, but it seems like every year we have to replace 2 or 3, and they're fairly costly, and our service calls are very costly. So we went and we added up what we've spent in service calls just since 2010. And in 2010, we spent $3,000 in service calls. Now this doesn't include, we know we're going to have, no matter what we have, a sprinkler system or the monitoring system, we're going to have a yearly fee. Our yearly fee is about $1,500. With the sprinkler system, it's, I think, about $1,200 right now for the head. So it's going to go up about $300 a year based on what our fire marshal quoted us from his experience. But we spent $3,000 in 2010, a little under $1,000 in 2011. We must have had a good year, but we had 4 fire calls, so those are costly, even though the city at this time doesn't pay for fire calls. The fire department, there's never been a fire, and they get called to go out there. And then this year, now we've spent about $2,300 in maintenance calls. That's just from Simplex calling us and saying there's either a trouble signal or their alarm. We need to send out a technician because the panel keeps going off, and we can only take it offline for 24 hours or until we know a person's coming out there. So it's been just an ongoing issue. When we originally built the building in 2007, the sprinkler system was not put in at the time, I believe. This was just prior to me coming, but I believe it was not put in because of the overall cost of the project. There was the idea to keep the project cost down at the time. But I think now you'll see that if we install the wet sprinkler or the dry sprinkler system, it's going to be about $15,000. We should have maybe a 7-year payback on that by reducing the number of calls that we have. That's not to say we won't have a call here or there that we still have to have someone come out for, but it will, I think, reduce it pretty significantly. Also, the pool system there's wood on top, so if you have a sprinkler system, it may take care of the damage a little bit sooner than have the alarms just going off waiting for the fire department to come. That wood is cedar on the top half of the building. That would probably go up pretty quickly. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion or questions. Let's see what you'd like to do from here.
Councilor Sherman.
Was there any sort of warranty on the current system, the Simplex system that you're talking about?
I don't believe so. There's a yearly review that they do for all of our systems, both fire or alarm and fire. So they check it to make sure it's good to go every year, but the heads are just individual units and they falter. So they come out and fix it as part of our contract, and they're there within usually 24 hours, but we haven't had anything covered under warranty at this time.
Councilor Lehman.
I don't understand how a dry sprinkler system works.
I should have Rick here, but I believe what they've told me is the dry sprinkler system keeps the pipes inside the building empty of water, so we don't have to heat the whole building. What it has is it comes into a certain point in the building where there's a valve that's triggered when the smoke is there, or when there's a fire that triggers the alarms. That valve opens, so we will have to have a small space heater in a small area of the building that will keep just that one section of pipe. I believe it's really small is what Mr. Pitschneider has told me. So we'll heat that one area, but we won't have to heat the whole building. And it would be no different than having a wet system, other than we can have it because we're not heating that facility. So there's a couple second delay before the water gets to the heads, as if it would, instead of being right there.
Does the dry system still use the same smoke alarms as the wet system?
Yes.
So we're still gonna have the frequency of calls that we have because the smoke alarms are gonna stay the same?
No, what it has is the sprinkler system has sensors on it that are specifically for the heat of, I'm not sure exactly the language for it, but right now we have monitoring heads that are to smoke and things get in them. We wouldn't have those monitoring heads anymore. We'd simply just have the sprinkler system as we have in all of our other buildings. And then the alarm would go off, so we'd have that same sound, but we wouldn't have, they're not sensors. They're actually whatever's in the water pipes that trigger it. I'm sorry, I'm not in fire, so I can't.
I may be able to help with that, but I think what we have now is a particulate fire alarm, like a smoke detector, but it's reading particulates like the dust in the sand. But it's a heat-activated system like your fusible links and your sprinkler systems that the heat actually activates the whole system.
On the new system.
On the new system that's proposed, yeah. So I don't think it's a smoke detector that's actually setting it off. If I'm
Right, no.
right.
No,
it's a heat
it's
system.
heat censored, because that is what Mr. Pitschneider did say our other option would be, is to change out our current smoke heads to heat sensor heads, which hopefully would cut down on the calls a lot, but you still have those heads you're dealing with, where in the sprinkler system, your heat sensors are in your little sprayers.
Yeah.
You have.
And then what warranty on this system, if we bought this system, do we have?
That I don't know, I could check on that.
Okay.
I don't have that information.
Guess I'd like to know that, because then if we have a year warranty or something on it, then you can expect to have zero cost for the first year of false alarms and heads and whatever.
Right now, I do know at the community center, we have just well, we have both the monitoring and the sprinkler system, but because we're in an enclosed building, we had one call this year with a trouble signal. And I believe either we had one or didn't have any last year. I don't recall of any, but we may have had one that I'm not thinking of. But the calls are much lower for that facility.
Councilor Whiting.
Thank you. I think you're going to guarantee a year on anything you get, typically parts and labor. But my question to you is, on those cracks in the building, is that some structural issues there, or has that been looked at, or just normal?
No, they're superficial. When we did talk with the painter and what they're looking at, they're very, very small. If they get to, I think he said, 1/10 of an inch, which I think is what a dime is, then they start getting concerned with them breaking and getting bigger. But he said all of the ones that we have right now are under that as long as we caulk them and maintain them, we shouldn't have any structural issues at this point. So he would have said, when we did walk it, he did say that he would do a thorough inspection in that quote and see if there's any that we're concerned with. But at this time, the quote says not, and he said they're basically just need to be caulked and.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lehman.
On the painting and crack filling at the community center, a couple of questions there. First one is if the front of the building, the color scheme that it currently has, granted it's faded out, but a repaint there, I can see it's not, it doesn't give you that all one color warehouse look, but right there. But the back side of the building, somehow we're gonna have to do something so that we're not violating our own no monotony clause, because it's gonna look like a big warehouse if it's all just one color on the back.
Well, maybe we can add a stripe.
Well, I don't know what the
Yeah.
answer is, but
Okay. I can look
It's-
at
it's-
that, what the regulations are, and when we pick colors and.
well,
No dog fighting.
see, the front looks good because it's broke up with different colors.
Mhm.
In the back, I mean, it helps when it's broke up with the striping. I don't know if it's the right answer, but it does help it. If you
Right.
try to picture it just all one great big surface of one color,
Yeah,
it
right.
gives it a warehouse look.
Right now, the gym is all one color, but the rest is striped. So this is the ice arena, it's striped. This is the gym.
Mayor, members of the council, maybe I can shed a little light on that. In Chapter 11, the regulations that we have related to building monotony and materials are applicable to the multifamily zones and the commercial zones. So technically would not apply to this facility. The nature of the panels themselves, because they have some relief, would address that. Certainly, if it's desirable, we'll work with Ms. Polly to see if there's something that can be done on those larger surfaces without simply painting stripes, if there's a way to avoid doing that. I don't think Walmart is using orange much these days, so we could use that. But technically, it wouldn't apply to this facility. However, I think the concern's a fair one.
Yep.
That we'll look at with her.
And Mayor, last question I had was, the 5-year plan that was given to us for, Park and Rec Asset Fund didn't include this. I don't have that plan in front of me. And if I did, I would ask, is there anything on that plan that we could forego for this project?
I can take a look and see what we have on there, and I'm not sure I put any community center things on there recently, other than some mechanical ones, just because I knew that this was something we wanted to bring forward as a discussion item. And this is the first year, really, we've put our building funds into Park Asset, so I can double check. I don't think I had put much on for community center, but yeah, I will look and see what we possibly could shift as far as community center maintenance goes, or if needed, and see what that is.
And
But-
I'd just like to have more information on the sprinkler system. Chief Rich Schneider or somebody to educate me.
Do you need that before? Well, we'll see motions here. All right, any other last questions? All right, do we have any motions?
I do believe before I actually go ahead and do it, I think because of the cost, and Julia remind me that I need to have multiple quotes that I'd bring forward to you for a final approval anyway. But this would be to go out and get those multiple quotes then. And I can have all that information.
Councilor Sherman.
I'll make a motion to approve the maintenance and painting of the exterior of the community center and installation of sprinkler system at San Ventura Aquatics Park, utilizing funds from the Park Asset Fund.
Do we have a second?
Was that a motion to do it or to proceed with quotes?
To proceed with quotes, I could add that, yes.
There you
Thank you.
Okay, then I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilor Clay. Any discussion? Councilor Sherman?
I just have a comment. I mean, the reason that I am supportive of it is this is something that I've been talking about whenever we talk about the park assets, is to make sure that we're maintaining and updating where needed and necessary. And clearly, the community center, particularly having been 17 years without this being touched, it seems that it's appropriate that we do this at this point in time. And it's, frankly, it's a fraction of the price of what the roof cost. So.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Councilor Lehman?
If it's easier, I'd like to have Mark probably have whoever, either Mr. Pitt Schneider or Chief Coleman, get a hold of me at their convenience, whenever it's free for them, to educate me on the fire systems.
We'll do that, thank you.
Very good. Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
I will be back.
Item 10E1, amendments to contract for private development between City and All Saints Senior Living of Shakopee LLC. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. For those who may be watching who weren't paying attention during the EDA portion, just a brief summary. Earlier this year, the City Council and the EDA entered into a contract for private development for the All Saints Senior Living Project to be located on Thrush, basically on Thrush and Independence Boulevard. That contract for private development involved a tax increment financing district. And the way that works is that the developer will pay the upfront costs of the eligible improvements. And so long as they do that, there's enough increment and they meet their contractual obligations under the contract for private development, the city will, on an annual basis, pay them the increment that's identified to offset the cost of those initial investments. When they first proposed the project, there were 80 units proposed in the project. There are two factors that they identified for you sitting as the EDA that caused them to increase that to 84. One of them was that the market study indicated that there was a much stronger demand for this kind of housing. And again, very briefly, this project involves a few independent living units, some assisted living units, and some memory care units. Because tax increment financing is involved, 20% of those will have to be available to low and moderate income persons. They also looked at their architectural planning and saw that they had floor space to accommodate a few more units, so they've increased that to 84. Hence the request to approve the First Amendment to the contract for private development. In addition, as you learned earlier this evening, sitting as the EDA, they've sought financing for the project from Tradition Capital Bank, which wishes them to pledge the TIF note to that loan. And as Mr. Fink explained to you, the TIF note is not signed until they've actually made those upfront investments, and then the tax increment payment schedule begins. There's no outlay by the city other than the agreed to increment. If it's generated, that would be shared with them. So what you're asked to do, sitting as the City Council today, is to approve a companion resolution 7256, which approves that First Amendment to the contract for private development between the City of Shakopee, the EDA, and All Saints Senior Living, and also to consent to the pledge of that tax increment note between All Saints and Tradition Capital Bank. And if you've thought of other questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Anything else on this? Seeing nothing, I'll entertain a motion from council. Councilor Clay.
Offer resolution 7256. I won't read it again as he did such a good job.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Sherman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Did I call out the right number?
You did.
It is 56. In the
Correct.
report, there's references 55. but
My
okay.
apologies. Operator error, not the administrator's office error.
All right, 10E2, All Saints preliminary plat and CUP.
Thank you again, Mayor and members of the council. A few procedural items just to set the context for you. The developer is acquiring 3 acres for this project from the church. It's part of a 10-acre site. So in order to proceed with that project, they need to plat the property, and in a moment I'll show you the proposed plat titled Shakopee Catholic Community Plat 1. The balance of that 10-acre site would be available in the future for development, potentially for a church or other uses related to the campus that already exists there with the Sachs Area School. In addition, you may recall that the city of Shakopee had not had this kind of project before. Hence, its zoning code did not specifically identify senior living projects like this as either a permitted or conditionally permitted use. So this developer went through the process of requesting from the Board of Adjustment and Appeals a determination that the nature of this use and its impact was similar to other uses that are permitted by conditional use permit in the R1B zone. They coincidentally had to rezone the property because it had remained ag in zoning even though guided for single-family residential use. The board did find it was a similar use. That means that the use becomes one that's allowed by conditional use permit, so they made application for conditional use permit. When the city of Shakopee has a plat as well as another land use application that's related to it, our code provides that those would proceed together through the Planning Commission and the City Council. Ordinarily, a CUP would find a decision at the Board of Adjustment Appeals if there was no plat associated with it. So what you have in front of you today for your consideration at the end of your discussion, excuse me, is a resolution that contains findings related to both the proposed plat and the conditional use permit and conditions of approval. So to some specifics, and these are part of your packet, but for those who may be watching, this is the site, and again, this is Independence Drive. This is Thrush Street. The area that they're acquiring for the project is located here on Independence and Thrush. And what's proposed is essentially a plat with one developable lot and an outlot for future use. Again, it's called Shakopee Catholic Community Plat 1. They would develop Lot 1, Block 1 with the All Saints complex, and then the balance would remain in the ownership of the diocese for future development or sale, whatever is appropriate. In terms of the conditional use permit, as you know, conditional use permits usually involve the approval of a specific plan. And a couple of changes to note. You'll see in your report that the review of this took place between the October and November meetings of the Planning Commission. And at the October meeting, there were a couple of residents on Thrush who testified about concerns that they had related to the site. One of them was a member of the commission who recused himself so he could testify about those concerns. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them as we go along. One of them, the site, again, provides for the major facade of the structure to face north. The back area, including some garages for the independent living units, is on the south. In its original form, there was not only access on the north. Originally, it was on this lot. It's now been moved so it would be on the outlot, and it would be a shared access for this site and any future development on that outlot. There were a couple of access points on Thrush Avenue, and what they've now done, you can see on the site plan, is provide for access from this back area along the side of the building on Independence Drive, and then back out to Independence rather than out to Thrush. There is access indicated here for public safety purposes, and you can, if you look closely, see the knockdown bollards that are indicated there. There was also a concern about the location of the trash enclosure, which in the original CUP plan was located on the south side or back of the complex, and that's been relocated now to the front. At the November meeting, we did have testimony from those folks who had testified in October, saying that they appreciated the changes, that they had addressed a number of those things. I will share with you that we had one person at least, Commissioner Clem, who had recused himself, indicating he still had concerns about the size of this project in the zoning district as well as the height. You also have in your packet a drawing which indicates the proposed landscaping, which was modified as well between the October and November meetings to try and address some of the concerns that were raised by the residents. And I'm sure that the developer has a better handle on the color exhibits, but just to give you an idea of what the project would look like, Again, this is a project that is not technically subject to the building material requirements, but they've tried to address the kinds of materials that would be utilized under those standards. And in fact, they had some discussion at the November meeting regarding other things that they were looking at that may modify the visual bulk, if you will, of the three-story portions. Just another view of the project and what they'd been looking at, and they can perhaps address that in some greater detail for you. At the conclusion of the November discussion, there were 5 members of the Planning Commission in attendance. They did recommend to you approval of both the preliminary and final plat and the CUP. So you have a resolution for your consideration. It's Resolution 7255, which would approve the preliminary and final plat of Shakopee Catholic Community Plat 1 and the conditional use permit for senior housing. You'll of course see that there are a number of fairly standard conditions related to the plat. You'll see in the second part of the resolution that we've provided draft findings related to the conditional use permit that would support your approving it, as well as 6 conditions related to the actual implementation. We note, for example, that signage is not approved with CUPs. That's still subject to what our current sign requirements are. Construction material and landscaping is very specifically reviewed at the time of building permit, so you have an indication, but there may be some modifications, and sometimes that's because when we get to the actual plans, there are some materials that make sense in other locations than where they were first provided for in the plans. So with that, if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them, and again, Mr. Fink and Scott O'Brien are here as well, if you have questions for them.
Questions from Mr. Leek?
And if I failed to mention it, that vote was a 3-2 vote to recommend approval to you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. None. Would the applicant like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, I've been up here earlier this evening. My name is Roger Fink, Trident Development. This meeting hopefully will be the culmination of many, many months of applications and public meetings and hearings, and we want to thank the staff and folks here at the city for all their support and guidance. We've prepared a plat we believe that meets all the requirements of the city comments, engineering, stormwater management, and even the review with Shakopee Public Utility Company. So we think we've met all of the staff comments, reviews, and requirements of the plat itself with respect to easements, access, restrictions, and so forth. We have prepared and are ready to move forward with the private easements that are called for in the staff review for stormwater drainage and driveway access. Those are ready. I can share a copy of those as well. And we've read and we understand the conditions of approval. We do wish to approach the council regarding park dedication fee amount. We'll take that up in a short matter here. But aside from that, I would just submit to you that we'd ask for your approval as presented of this preliminary plat, final plat, and conditional use permit. I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for the applicant, not including yet the park dedication discussion? Councilor Lehman.
I would just make a comment, Mayor, that the breakup of the facade is appreciated, so it doesn't all look, you know, one color. You're breaking it up on the rough lines, the peaks, and so on and so forth, and I think that adds something to the project, so I, for one, appreciate that portion of it.
Thank you, Councilman Lehman.
Anything else? Mr. Leek?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I apologize for not raising it in my main presentation, but let me address the park dedication issue. And then if the applicants have any comments, they may want to make them.
Mr. Leek, can we hold off on that for just a minute?
We can, sure.
Because is there anybody from the audience who'd like to talk? homeowners or anyone else about the project? Okay, just want to make sure we're all covered there first.
Okay.
Mr. Clay, Councilor Clay.
Park dedication issue a part of this resolution?
It is a part of the resolution because we've got a plat. Park dedication is a part of the platting process.
Okay.
And let me address that. I'll try to be fairly brief about it. Park dedication as applied to this is the multifamily rate in our adopted 2012 schedule. Jamie Polly can set me straight if I recall correctly. The estimated park dedication is about $378,000 or $373,800. They are requesting that you consider a reduction to about $231,000, if I recall the amount in the report. In the letter that you've got, they indicate the application of the sewer availability charges to this kind of project as a possible basis for considering this. I'd suggest that those two things are not really related. One measures the impact on the sanitary sewer system. One is measuring, theoretically, the potential impact on the city's park and trail recreation assets. If you, at the end of your discussion, are of a mind to consider a reduction, what I might suggest to you this evening is that you approve the resolution as it stands tonight with direction to staff to look at whether or not an adjustment is in order. For example, because you think the memory care unit residents really are not going to have an impact on our assets, and so we should consider some kind of reduction, maybe not specifically the number that they've talked about. And if we find an adjustment is appropriate, either do one of two things. If they've already recorded the plat, paid the park dedication fee, issue a refund based on that adjustment, we'd have to come back to you anyway with an amendment to the plat resolution regarding park dedication. If the plat's not been recorded and it appears to staff that an adjustment is in order, we could still come back to you to make that amendment and then make the adjustment in what would be due as payment before the recording of the plat. So I hope that's reasonably clear. That's what I would suggest you consider rather than trying to negotiate out what the actual number is tonight.
Councilor Whiting.
Mr. Leek, is there any precedence to reducing the park dedication fees with any other businesses or any other development?
In my 16-plus years here, no, there's not. The thing that I would point out is that there's also no precedent for the city having had this kind of project in that time. I'm not sure when the nursing home was developed, but of course it's not quite the same kind of facility. So we don't have experience with this kind of facility. I know Ms. Polly has done some research with other communities. Some of them charge their multifamily park dedication rate. Some of them do not. Some don't charge park dedication. Some of that's dependent on where in the state they happen to be located, I would suspect. But we simply haven't had a project like this before. And again, remember, we had to go through the process of the Board of Adjustment determining that this was an appropriate use, having the property rezoned and a CUP sought. So we didn't have a basis for looking at this kind of use in the past.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Mr. O'Brien, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'll be brief as well. I think Michael made some good points there that I would just echo. Initially, when we put together that letter requesting you consider potentially reducing the park dedication fee on the project. Well, let me just step back for a minute. I've had some discussions with some of the council members just as to the totality of the fee schedule, the fee structure at the city, and the impact that has on overall development, not just our specific project. As Mr. Leek alluded to, the city doesn't have a fee schedule that specifically addresses this use, an assisted living use. What he alluded to and what he said, what was said in the letter is that the Metropolitan Council, and as an aside, I don't want to make judgments about how I feel about the Met Council or potentially how anybody else feels about the Met Council and the influence they have on some of our municipalities. But that said, they look at a use like ours and say, you're not going to have the same impact on our sewer system as 84 residential units. Therefore, we'll give you a credit. Mr. Leek said the park dedication fee is established and it's based on the impact that a use might have on the park and trail system. The average age of our resident, I believe I've alluded to this before in front of this body and some of the others, is 86 years old across the board at the facilities that Tealwood Management Company manages, both for us, for some municipalities throughout the state, and for other owners. The acuity level of our residents, because they're in an assisted living facility and because of their age, I wouldn't say doesn't ever allow them to go use a city park, but they're not users of city parks. We're not asking for a reduction of the fee from $373,800 to zero. We're asking for you to consider a reduction of the fee based on the fact that our use does not impact the park and trail system. However, we want to be good corporate citizens. I had a conversation with Mrs. Polly earlier this week, or last week, and just kind of laid out the case for a reduction in our fees. I'm not asking for her input right now. I just wanted to make note that we have had a discussion. As an aside, additionally, Mr. Leek made note of the fact that some outstate municipalities may not have park dedication fees, and he's entirely correct. If I could just put, I'll do it upside down. These are facilities that we've developed to date. We also have 2 other facilities that are in concept plan right now and in the development process. I'll just draw your attention to the park dedication fee line. As you can see, there's Shakopee's figure. It's $373,800. There's an outstate municipality, Marshall, where the fee we paid was $7,000. Andover is a metro city, same size as Shakopee. The fee was $7,500. St. Michael, the fee was $14,000, and then the fee, an outstate market that did have a fairly substantial fee, was the city of Princeton at $75,000. The 2 municipalities that we're currently working with are both metro area municipalities, and right now we have, I don't know what the fee is going to be on one because we're negotiating that with them. The other one we've been negotiated a fee of $0, and that's an interior ring suburb. So if you can look at the totality of the fees estimated to be in Shakopee, that figures $875,000, $873,664, and then you can see that the next highest fee that we paid to do a project to date has been $284,000, $276, $244, and then it drops down to $102. Now, the one thing I will point out is a reduction in park dedication fees doesn't have an impact on tax increment financing. The tax increment financing is the city of Shakopee saying we have affordable housing goals that we want to continue to meet per our comp plan. This use, assisted living, falls within the affordable, within that overall roof of housing that you want to, that you found that you want to keep affordable. That's what we've agreed to do, is to provide that affordable housing. So, as Councilor Lehman has pointed out in prior meetings, we take a reduction on those 20% of our units in order to get that tax increment financing. It doesn't have anything to do with the park dedication fee. So those are some things we just appreciate you considering, and I would stand for any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Ryan? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
All right, let's talk about that aspect first. Park dedication. What do folks think? Where are we headed on this? let everybody step up at once. Councilor Sherman.
I think Mr. Leek made a good recommendation in terms of how to move forward today, to take that consideration at another point in time and be able to amend if we make a different decision.
So you're open to it, is what?
Yeah, the recommendation that Mr. Leek made. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Open to that.
Which was what?
Mr. Leek?
Thank you, members of the council. My recommendation wasn't necessarily to consider a fee adjustment, but rather that if you thought it was appropriate to, that you approve the resolution in its current form and provide direction to staff to evaluate a potential reduction or action by the council in amending the resolution of approval, and either reimbursing already paid park dedication in the amount of the difference between the revised fee that's decided on and what's contained in the resolution, or if the plat's not been recorded, that we would simply adjust what's due before plat recording. So it was twofold. Approve the present resolution, but if you are of a mind to provide a reduction, direct us to look at what the appropriate reduction is and move forward on that basis, and then bring back the determination on that to you for amendment to the resolution.
Councilor Lehman.
I'm not in favor of negotiating our park dedication fee. I kind of have a different viewpoint on it. I look at it as a larger collective operation, somewhat like the schools. I mean, we've got a lot of fixed income senior citizens in Shakopee that are paying school taxes and have no kids in school. We have a lot of people that are paying taxes for our park system that don't use them. So it's more of a collective whole to me than it is to say individual, because when somebody comes forward with a development of 80 houses on a plat, are we going to tell them how many are you going to sell to older couples that may not utilize our park systems and then take them out of our calculation? I don't think so. Are we going to ask them if they have kids? And if they don't, you don't have to pay school taxes. We don't do that either. So I don't think collectively that works on multiple fronts. That's my personal feeling, because if that's the case, like, you know, you can make the same argument for the seniors that don't use the park system. You can make it for the people that don't have kids in school. And where does that leave us?
Okay. Anyone else? Councilor Clay?
I agree with Mr. Lehman's comments. Also, the fact that we have affordable housing and care facilities for senior citizens, to a certain extent, that brings more families, more people into the city, or keeps them here longer when grandpa and grandma have a place to stay. So there might be more of a secondary impact from your facility on Parks and Recreation than might be readily apparent. I'm also, someone who's always been in support of affordable housing and expansion of services for our senior citizens, since I'm going to be one here shortly. And because of that support, I have been in support of changing the guiding from agriculture to its current, and was okay with the zoning change, and also supported the tax increment financing money for the affordable housing aspect, or extra additional reduction in monthly rents for at least a number of units there. But I'm also equally in support parks and recreational facilities and opportunities for the opposite age group, our younger children. So I can sympathize and understand with their argument and then their rationale here, but I still think we should collect the full fee for the parks and recreation.
All right. Councilor Whiting?
I agree with both of these council members also. I do understand that it does cost a lot of money to do business in Shakopee. And this is a unique building project, and for that, I've kind of struggled back and forth with the concept of, we've given them some help with the tax increment financing, and how we collect our fees. I know some of these other cities don't collect fees like we do for park dedication. Either they're built out their parks, or they tax them in a different way to collect that money. We collect our money for parks through the building of parks through this dedication fee, and to separate one group out, that would help out any kind of future senior living if we made that part of our plan. But I would wonder, and Councilor Lehman mentioned it, it kind of creates that slippery slope. So it's a tough subject, and I'd be willing to look at reduction of fees, I guess, if we could look at it that way. But passing this resolution and looking at what we could do with that, I think that's important to try and create a better opportunity to get these in the future.
Okay. So is there anyone willing to make a motion for reducing the park dedication fee?
Mr. Mayor, no, I'm not willing to make that motion, but.
It's yours.
My suggestion would be to go ahead and adopt the resolutions, at least vote on resolution 7255, which is paying the park dedication fee per the city code.
Mm-hmm.
Get that acted on,
'Kay.
and then do a follow-up motion to see what the will of the council is as to whether you want to direct staff to study the issue any further with respect to this type of development.
Thank you, sir. All right. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion for resolution number 7255. Councilor Clay?
Offer Resolution 7255, a resolution of the City of Shakopee approving the preliminary and final plat of Shakopee Catholic Community Plat Number 1 and a conditional use permit for senior housing.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Now, are there any motions with regard to the park dedication fee that we can direct staff to do research or let it lie? Councilor Sherman?
I'll make a motion to direct staff to determine if there's an appropriate reduction in fee or not, and report back to the council with that information.
All right. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? I'm just going to say up front that I'm not in favor of doing that, because I think that with regards to this project, it's been very clear through the entire project what the park dedication fee is going to be and has been. So I'm not in favor for that reason. Just letting it be known. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Aye. Passes 3-2.
No, it was.
Ms. Polly?
Park dedication.
Just so you know, as council, I will be bringing forward park dedication fees in general as part of our fee schedule here, the second meeting in December. So just a clarification as far as what criteria do you want us to look at as far as whether or not we deem it appropriate for a reduction? Because I've done a survey and we can do more on what other communities, if they have a reduction for senior housing or not. I've done a lot of that already. Or are you not looking at what other cities are doing and just asking the city to come up with, or us as staff to come up with an amount? Can you clarify that for us?
Councilor Sherman?
Well, I believe it would be, so looking at this type of development, specifically assisted living, larger scale development, and how other cities have addressed that, and then making a determination if that's appropriate in the way that our fees are structured to have that additional kind of layer, or not. I mean, I guess that's how I look at it.
Okay, so based on other cities' practices.
Councilor Clay?
And it's important, maybe you already said, if a city's already built out or has very little land left for park development, that's gonna be less of an issue for them than it is for us. So that, that needs to be a consideration. And you probably also need to consider what's the city tax rate if they're funding their parks and recreations primarily through some other avenue of funding other than park dedication fees, as we do, pretty much solely. We need to look at that too, because maybe their park and recreation or park dedication fees are much lower than ours are, but their tax rate is higher because they're funding it in a different way. It's not an easy way, really an easy thing to compare at all now that I think about this, so good luck.
Councilor Lehman.
Demographics. If you have a community that's all seniors, the chances are their active uses are probably way down.
Okay. I will.
I'm not gonna
Okay.
slice it.
Aren't you happy you asked?
Well, I've done a pretty extensive survey on just the fees alone of what area metro cities have done and whether they're built out or not. We've looked at that, and I did ask the question of whether they have reductions for senior housing, but I haven't asked, some more specific questions. So I think I can go back and get a little bit more information and go even beyond and ask a few more communities and then work with Mr. Leak on that. So.
And Mayor, members of the council, there are a couple of additional elements that I think we should probably talk about with respect to the concern about the nature of the community. As you know, for a variety of issues, we've tried to look at communities that are similar to Shakopee in the sense that they have additional area for development, they're relatively young, and those are the kinds of communities that have typically tended to look at the kinds of issues that we did. Many of the communities, some of which she's already taken a look at, I believe already have this kind of facility in their communities, so they may have looked at the issue. I think, as Ms. Polly indicated, asking a couple more questions about that of them would be helpful. And I think we can probably assist with that a little bit if need be.
Sure.
We may also want to talk a little bit with the city attorney about the original basis for these fees. And I won't go into great detail, but the original basis for the fees as set by the city of Shakopee was on, if you will, an estimation of what the cost of development of the city's park and recreational assets would be, and how that related to the impact of different kinds of development on those costs. So we may want to talk about whether or not there's anything from other communities' experiences that goes to that issue of what the specific impact is of this kind of use.
Okay. I think I have enough. Thank you.
I'm just going to budge in real quick. Excuse me, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor, members of the council. I simply want to thank you all and the staff, in case I don't get a chance to be before you again. You've really put in a lot of hard work on this project, a lot of thought, a lot of careful consideration. We appreciate it. Thank you for your vote of approval tonight.
Thank you.
We're excited to have it
Thank
here.
you for bringing that project to our city. Do appreciate that.
All right, 10F1, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. The agenda item I have before you tonight is similar to that which Ms. Polly brought forward a little bit earlier. This is our proposed building fund projects for 2013 for our general government buildings. And those buildings consist of City Hall, the library, the police station, fire stations 1 and 2, the Public Works building, and the engineering building. In your packet for tonight's meeting, wrong button, there we go, was a table with an estimated financial outlook for our government buildings fund. We estimate a current balance of $6.3 million at the close of this year, keeping in mind that we've done 5 major projects out of this fund in 2012, the last of which was actually finished up yesterday. We've put a new roof on the community center. We've put new air conditioners into the police station and the library. We've replaced all of the overhead doors, and we'll be finishing actually the service doors on the engineering building. And we've done a lighting upgrade for energy efficiency purposes at the police station, and that's the one that we just got wrapped up yesterday. So those were our 5 big projects out of this fund for 2012. Now that we're done with those, we're looking to 2013 and saying, what's on the to-do list for next year. So you can see we estimate a starting balance of roughly $6.3 million for this fund as of 1/1/2013. In the preliminary budget, we have departmental rents, which are revenue into this fund of $664,616. That is a flat rent charge. That's identical to the rents that were charged for 2012. We've carried over no increase for 2013. Estimated interest earnings of about $40,000, which gives us total revenues of $704,000. The first and foremost out of this fund next year, we need to pay our debt. We have debt service on the Public Works building, which was constructed in 2005, 2006, amounting to $465,000 a year. So that's the mortgage on that building, so to speak. And then the proposed projects that I'd like to talk to you about tonight. Together that adds up to $726,000 in expenditures proposed out of the fund, which would leave the fund down about $22,000 at the close of the year from where we estimate it would start. So that's the big picture overview. Going back here. The first project up for next year is a lighting replacement project, and I would categorize this one as the closest to a must-do on the list of any of them, and that's because a certain style of light bulbs known as T12s are no longer being manufactured or sold. We have stocked up and created a supply for ourselves, but we will be unable to get any more of those moving into the future. The entire engineering building, which I believe was built in 1975, is outfitted with those T12 lights. What looks like a small building from the street is actually quite expansive as you get back. We've done one walkthrough there with a salesperson, and there are a lot of light fixtures, and they all use T12s. So we're going to need to do a complete lighting overhaul on the interior of that building. Our estimated cost right now is that we should be able to do this for $40,000 or less. We will see energy efficiency benefits from doing this. Any of the options we would go with would use less energy than the fixtures that we're replacing. And we're looking at LED as a possibility. We've met with one salesperson that sells LED products, and we're still trying to investigate that and determine if that's the best option for the interior of that building. Additionally, there's a potential for a SPUC rebate on a project like this, especially if we can get to it early in the year. SPUC works on a calendar year traditionally with their rebates, and once they're gone for the year, they're gone. So we'd like to try to get this project teed up and moving in January or February in hopes of taking advantage of that. The bay areas where the equipment and trucks are parked at Fire Station 1 also have T12s. Smaller number of fixtures in there. So our proposal is that we redo the engineering building in 2013. We use the stash of T12s that we have stored up to keep the fire station well lit through the year, and then we replace the lights in the fire station in 2014 is the proposal there. Roof maintenance. I mentioned we did a major roof project over $1 million to replace the community center roof in 2012. We have two much smaller roof projects proposed for 2013. One is for the new Public Works building, which, as I mentioned, is about 6 years old, almost 7. And that's estimated to cost $33,000. That has largely to do with the flashings, the metal trim that are around the edges of the roof are not properly installed, and we're getting wind-blown water up inside them and seeing water damage on the inside of that building. And an even smaller project at Fire Station number 1, which is a good 15 years old now, and it just needs some general roof maintenance. The goal there being to extend the life of that roof so that we get at least 20 years out of that roof with some investment in them. All of these prices are a first guess budget estimate. If you are comfortable with the list, we will go forward and get multiple quotes from multiple vendors and really zone in on an exact price for each. The next one is the smallest project on the list, and that's a water softener for this building here at City Hall. Commercial water softeners are remarkably expensive given based on the number of fixtures you have in a building. Estimated cost is $7,000. We're at the point where City Hall is our last building that doesn't have a water softener, and it's causing us to have to repair and replace parts of our toilets and parts of our sinks faster, and we're also seeing, we started off adding water softeners to extend the life of our water heaters. They were getting so much buildup that we weren't getting the life out of those. So that's a pretty small project, but we'll get all of our buildings with soft water and hopefully alleviate those maintenance problems that we're seeing. City Hall interior improvements. An estimated cost for several small projects totaled together on this one is $75,000. The largest chunk of that, about half of that, is for replacement carpeting in the basement of this building. The first floor and the second floor of this building had new carpeting put in about 5 years ago. At that time, we were still living with a thought that we might be building a new city hall at some point in the foreseeable future, and we did not invest in replacing the flooring in the basement. It's now another 5 years older than what we replaced up here, and it's just downright threadbare in some parts. It's discolored and stained, and the basement is accessed by the public, as that's where our public restrooms are for this building. So we would like to replace that. A stairwell water problem. We have a stairwell that leads to the second floor of this building, and when we started removing wallpaper in the lobby and looking under the wallpaper in the stairwell, we discovered that the wallpaper was hiding water damage. It had not seeped through the wallpaper, but when we peel it back, we've got wet and damaged drywall in that stairway. So we're doing some further investigation, trying to figure out how extensive the leakage is and exactly the source of it, but that's going to need, we have some early signs of mold to go along with that. That's going to need to be cleaned up. Door security. A majority of this building is secured by a key card access system, guiding the public to the public spaces of the building and keeping our staff spaces secured. We have 4 remaining doors to get to the point where all of our private spaces are behind a key card access. And we'd like to complete that next year. And lastly, if we still have money left after tackling those other projects, we've been working slowly to replace furniture in the building that's approaching 20 years old. And we have one department, the Community Development Department, left that has not been taken care of by the allocations made previously. So we'd like to try to wrap that up. And the last project and the largest project on the list is one that may be a little bit of a surprise because we've traditionally funded this work in a different manner, and that is the audiovisual equipment in this room. In the past, the equipment, and when I say equipment, I'm talking about the monitors and microphones at the dais there, everything around me here at the podium, the projector, had been paid for by the telecom fund. The city was putting all of its franchise fee revenue and all of its PEG fee revenue into the telecommunications fund, and they had built up quite a healthy balance over the years. We couldn't begin to spend that money on a year-by-year basis, but it did create a fund that was there when we had a major expenditure. The city discontinued that practice, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, and the franchise fee revenues are now going into the general fund balance. And the telecom division operates like every other division of the city. It does not have a fund that rolls over from one year to the next. It just gets an operating budget allocation. We've now reached the point where the equipment in this room is 10 years old, and it's scheduled for replacement. And complicating the process and adding to the expense, we pretty much have no choice but to convert from our current analog system to digital equipment. A like-for-like replacement of exactly what we've got is not available on the marketplace anymore. And once we start moving one piece to digital, that it all connects to one another. And we've tried multiple different scenarios to see if we couldn't phase this project over 2 or 3 years. And so far we haven't found a way to make that work. Rough estimate on this one, there's a lot of moving parts that we're still trying to pin down, is $85,000 to $95,000. So yeah, that is one where the equipment, as you can tell, as our viewers at home tonight can hopefully tell, is currently functioning. But it's all off of warranty. Like I said, it's all 10 years old or older. And you know, if it breaks, we could be off air when our boards and commissions and our residents count on us to be consistently providing the meeting coverage that we do today. So that is the last of the projects on the list. If it's all right with you, I'll go back to kind of the big picture look. I guess what I'm hoping the council can provide me tonight is with feedback and any questions you might have about the projects, the need for them, potential to phase them or adjust the timing on them. Once we get to a list that the council is generally comfortable with, our facilities staff and I will go about getting the proper quotes or bids to an exact dollar amount and multiple quotes from different vendors and so forth before returning with each individual item and an exact price.
Councilor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any estimate of savings on the lighting projects for changing over to any type of lighting?
We're not far enough in the investigation, and whether we go with LED versus T5s or T8s will make a big difference in what the energy savings is. So I don't have that information right now, other than just common sense. We've got 1975 lights in that building, so absolutely anything we do is going to be a recognizable improvement, but I don't have a dollar amount that I could give you right now.
If I could continue, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely.
Now, as many years ago, I was chair of the Cable Access Corporation, back when it was still that, we replaced all the AV in this room. As far as I know, all of it, at least the cameras and things like that, since that time, and I think the projector, since that time it was done again. And so it's actually been 10 years. Am I getting that old, or?
Yeah.
Has it been that long? Okay.
I'm coming up on my 8th anniversary with the city, and I can guarantee you it hasn't been done in that time frame. And as best we can tell, going back to our manuals and documentation, it's 10 years old. We are not talking about the cameras. The cameras are relatively new. You may recall those have been done last year, I believe. So it's not the actual cameras themselves, but how this podium connects to the back room and to the dais in front of you is 10 years old.
Other questions?
I had the same question about the AV for almost 100,000. You know, parts of it are new. I don't know which parts are old or which parts are new. I'll have to rely on the staff to tell me that. I can't remember how old his microphones are.
Is there, I'm sorry, did you have something to say?
Nope.
Is there anything that has been not added to this list that's in the outlook for future years that would make you more efficient and improve things right now that we could do that you've left off that you haven't wanted to look at yet?
Like I said, I think that the lighting in the fire station #1 is an issue, and we've kind of looked at phasing that, doing one building this year and another building the next year. The other project that I'm aware of on the horizon is actually furnishings for the library. The city owns the building and the furnishings in the library, and those get quite a bit of public use. But from an efficiency standpoint, specific to your question, no, we've generally taken an approach of doing energy efficiency projects just flat out solely for the energy efficiency benefit when we see a fairly quick return on investment, somewhere in the 2 to 3 year range. In other instances where the return on investment has been longer, we've taken the approach of utilizing the equipment we have to the end of its lifespan and then buying the most energy efficient thing we can do when it's time to replace it, but not actually tearing out operable equipment for the sake of replacing it with energy efficiency. The next large mechanical item that I would foresee is the boiler at the community center. By age, it's functioning well right now, but it's original to the building, just like the roof was and the exterior that Ms. Polly talked about. So that's the next major mechanical that I'm aware of. With our air conditioners that we replaced this year, knock on wood, our mechanicals should be in good shape. We think we've taken care of our lemons or our frequent flyers that seem to be constantly drawing money.
And I'm more referring to like staff efficiency and space planning and those kinds of things to make sure that we're working, everybody has access to what they need to, and cubicles are working and all that kind of stuff.
Like I said, I think replacing the final furnishings, we've significantly moved people around in this building to better group work groups together so that people are in close proximity to their coworkers and their supervisors. We've done some of that this year, and we'll continue to do that with the new positions we're looking at adding next year. But beyond what's on the list, I'm not aware of any.
Councilor Lehman.
The next biggest efficiency improvement that the city could make would be to build a new city hall on our, next to our police department where we own the property. Because then you have staff all concentrated in one location instead of driving all over town to try to communicate with each other and go over plans, and you make it a one-stop shop for development or for residents. They can stop here, and if that's the wrong building, they can say it's right next door or right across the street. That was the intent of that concept years ago when we built the police department and the public works building and changed the old public works building over to engineering. In the future, to have that centralized location for staff efficiencies and public efficiencies, as well as development efficiencies.
So what?
That is the end result.
Why hasn't that moved forward at all yet?
Well, it has. We've built the police department building there. We've built the public works building there.
Well, I mean the city hall portion of it.
Well, I mean, you can only do so much so quick. Takes time.
Right.
Well, if we're gonna do that, I'll have to run for re-election so I get my name on the plate on the wall. So.
As long as your priorities are straight, Councilor.
Mr.
Bruce
Mayor,
Streets.
if I might, I think I alluded to earlier, my tenure here. When I started working for the city in 2005, engineering was in this building. Development was moving faster, so the engineering department was larger than it is today, as was the community development department. And we had people doubled up in offices and crammed into corners in the basement. We were really jam-packed. Moving the engineering department out relieved a lot of that pressure, as well as we reduced some staff due to the economy. And so I think those two things pushed the city hall further out.
The space needs are no longer there, but.
All right. Councilor Whiting.
One other question on the AV portion of it. Would that increase our ability to Skype and utilize some of that telecommunication, telecommuting and that kind of thing?
We've been looking at that, and it is our goal to move us in that direction and get us better prepared. I think when the final quotes come to you, you'll see a certain dollar amount for replacing what we have to continue operating as we are, and then kind of an add-on or an option if you want to equip the facility for teleconferencing.
All right, any other questions? Councilor Clay.
Make a motion to direct staff to proceed with the planning and development of the proposed building projects, and then bring them back to us individually.
Do we have a second? Councilor Lehman?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 10F2, selection of listing agent for former fire station.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next agenda item, as you just stated, has to do with our former fire station site located at the corner of 2nd and Scott Street. After considering some possible future uses for the building earlier in the year, the council's most recent direction to staff was to begin the process of selling the fire station using a commercial real estate agent. The city issued a request for proposals to determine what interested agents might be out there, and we received 2 responses by the deadline. You can see them summarized in the staff memo. The first is for, I always say this wrong. Kubish Realty, a local real estate company that does both residential and commercial listings, as well as some development work. They have submitted a proposal seeking a 6-month listing and a 5% commission. The second proposal is from Bill Wolfson, who's with Coldwell Banker Burnett. Mr. Wolfson is based out of Wayzata, has 18 years of experience. He does have several commercial listings in the city currently. That's how we located him to send him the RFP. And he's seeking a 1-year contract and a 6% commission.
Do you have a recommendation?
I guess my recommendation is largely based on the duration. Personally, I would be more comfortable with a 6-month listing than a 1-year listing, is my inclination. I think as far as qualifications, both appear to be well-qualified agents with good experience in other commercial listings in town.
Thank you. Council Lehman?
I'm in favor of Kubish because they're local, they know the area, they know Shakopee's vision, and they know the market in this area.
All right. Is that a motion?
And 1%.
Oh.
I would look to Mr.
I
Clay here.
I don't have enough experience with commercial real estate in this side of the river. I'd be interested in knowing how many properties, commercial properties, each one of them has sold in the general area in the last 12 months. Listings don't count.
Yep.
Maybe you could get that information and bring it back to us.
I can certainly do more digging on that. I know they both have a property currently under contract in town. They both wanted, to make that point. So
And
they both
again,
have a
is-
recent sale, but I can do a tally.
Whether it's 5% or 6%, if it's 6% and it's being marketed much more widely and aggressively, if for a commercial property, you pretty much need to spend some money above and beyond just putting it on MLS commercials thing and hope that somebody sees it. Just because they're asking for a year doesn't mean we can't say 9 months. I'd like to give whoever it is at least through the end of summer.
Okay. Are there any motions?
I'll make a motion.
Council Lane?
Let's see, I guess I'll direct the appropriate city officials to enter into a listing contract with Kubish Realty for the 6-month duration at 5%.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilor Whiting. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes 4-1. All right, we move back now. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Move back now to item number 5, with the consent agenda. Item removed. Consent agenda for 4F6.
Mr. Mayor, the question is whether it could be deferred to another evening. Both the second and fourth Tuesdays are open if you'd want to do that, and instead of first and third. We start to run into a couple of problems anyway on Thursday nights. This is Tuesday, we don't have the January, or excuse me, December. we don't
The
have
reason I brought it
January.
up too is
Christmas Eve.
I noticed just later this afternoon when I was at work that this particular month we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Tuesdays. So even if we move it back a week, the second meeting would be on the 22nd. There's still the 29th of January. So there's a 2-week stretch before the next meeting. So it wouldn't be piling up, with meeting a week. So.
Mr. Mayor, and you certainly have the week between New Year's or Christmas and New Year's, which typically is a slower week, so it's quite probable that would be if you wanted to defer for a week, you could move back to second and fourth.
And Councilor Sherman may need some extra, time to get over all the partying and stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Celebrating New Year's with a new baby.
We also, I suspect, will have at least a suggestion for one workshop that month. So if you want to go the second and fourth, that's certainly fine.
A workshop
Good.
for.
We have lots of things
We
that
love
we need to sit and
workshops.
talk with you about, so.
Just plan on living here.
Yeah.
Caught.
We really should raise our pay if we're gonna go.
Fifth Tuesday's always an issue for me.
They'll bring a toolbox with.
Fifth Tuesday?
Yeah.
So second and fourth is good?
Rather loaves and fishes night.
All right. Let's finish this one up. So second and fourth, does anyone have any conflicts with that?
What you can do is direct staff to prepare a resolution. We'll bring that back, and that would be to move the meetings to January, was it 15th, 8th, and 22nd.
Councilor Lehman.
Can we make sure we make the public aware of the change?
We always post, we always put our normal information out. Yes, we will certainly do
People
that.
just expect and assume it's gonna be the first and third.
Jim, you're okay with it? Okay.
Thanks, Jim. All right,
Yes.
so we still need a motion, right? We don't have a motion on the floor?
Thought he was gonna bring back
We have motion directing staff to bring back.
make a motion directing staff to bring back a change for January from first and third to second, fourth Tuesday.
January 8th and the 26th.
Some ice cream Sunday.
Second by Councilor Sherman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 11, councilmember reports. Councilor Sherman.
No report this evening.
Councilor Lehman.
I attended the American Legion Veterans Day ceremony.
Thank you for doing that, by the way.
Yep. And what you call it, Derby Days meets on the 29th of
Okay.
November.
Councilor Clay.
From the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission, the Water Department got an award from the Department of Health, Minnesota Department of Health, for its quality award for its water fluoridation program, hanging on the wall. Wow. The was a problem with a fuse at the Dean Lakes number 2 substation. A gas fuse needed to be repaired. I only mentioned it because that substation was down completely for a while, but just kind of emphasizes the fact that the electrical system and substations in Shakopee are designed well enough so that if we lose one substation, the others can pick up the load and carry on without any disruption of service to the public. So just a nice little thing to know. Also, we used to buy our power from Xcel Energy and also from Great River Electric power companies. Great River Electric has been in the news lately. They built a $457 million coal-fired plant in North or South Dakota. But with the decrease in demand for electricity from the economy as well as from conservation efforts that are mandated by state and federal organizations, there wasn't enough electric demand to actually start using this expensive new coal-fired plant. That's kind of the bad news. The good news is that we don't buy electricity from either of them anymore. We're with the Minnesota Municipal Power Association, which is a association of 10 or 11 cities throughout Minnesota and one other outstate one. In an effort to comply with Minnesota's requirement that by 2015, 10 or 15% of our electric energy is supposed to be from renewable resources. The MMPA started up this large wind farm down south of here, and rather than having to borrow money for a good portion of that, they were awarded 25 or $26 million of what people always used to call the Obama money, the stimulus money. Because of that money, being able to write down and the expenses to do this mandated wind farm, a year or so ago we were looking at rate increases, electrical rate increases for our ratepayers here in Shakopee. But because of that, everything's working so well that the rates are staying the same and not increasing from last year, which saves our ratepayers about $6 million a year. So, and that's each year. So that $25 million of Obama money, which people like to scorn so much, is paying off very well for this particular community for a number of years. Just that I'd throw that out there, then now you can do the Republican response. So I'm done.
All right, let's get
questions
through council reports first before we get into this. Councilor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 10th, Mr. McNeil and I attended the school district's environmental scan, which was a group of about 70 community leaders got together. The school district provided just a ton of information on demographics for the city and where the growth patterns are and where there's some needs and goals for them. The workshop was held here down at in town here, and they worked on the new mission and goals for the school district, and it was a very positive event, and thought it went well. Any comments from you, Mr. McNeil?
It was fabulous.
All right, I do have packets of piles of information for you, and I left them in the car. I'll bring that in for you. But I also attended the news release from the Met Council and the MPCA on the health of the river, and it's good news for us that live right by the river. The chemical oxygen demand is down, so the oxygen levels are up in the river, making it a lot more healthy. The condition was phosphorus levels from local sewage plants that was creating this concern for the river. So through much investment, like at Blue Lake for our concerns that handles quite a bit of sewage for the whole western metro area, they brought phosphorus levels down, and throughout the whole Minnesota River, things are looking good. And if again next year they come up with some more similar results, because the river was so down this year and the flow was so low, they got good samplings, they figured, since it wasn't all flooded and running so hard. So next year that it could be delisted actually from being impaired, so that's good news.
Very good. Anything else? Councilor Lehman?
I was gonna
Let's
ask-
go pertinent here.
I was gonna,
Before he does that, I'll just mention that Blue Lake handles almost 500,000 people. It covers all the way from like
Carver?
Waconia and
Waconia,
Pearl Lake.
Plymouth, yes,
Lake Minnetonka. or-
Chaska,
yeah,
Pearl Lake.
Chaska, through 180 miles of interceptor pipes, and it can handle about 250 million gallons of stuff a day.
I'll tell you
Okay,
about
now
the,
go ahead.
tell you about the tour later.
All right.
I was,
Councilor Lehman?
I was wondering if Lowell's had a replacement fuse for that center out there in Dean Lake substation.
No.
No?
No,
It's a little bit bigger than a little screw-in job.
yeah.
All right.
Lot bigger.
Was the 25 million from the 1.5 trillion yearly deficit, or is it from the 16 trillion?
Okay, we are not going to get into this right now. Item number 12, any other business? Actually, I do have one other business. You can see that Councilors Clay and myself are hairier than normal, and
Hey, I didn't shave on purpose.
Councilor Lehman is about the same, and
I can't
and
pull it off. So.
we are growing mustaches for Movember. That's November with an M instead. There are a bunch of folks from Shakopee who are. It's to raise awareness and money for men's health issues like prostate cancer, testicular cancer, mental health, diabetes, a lot of things that affect guys. And so I'm on a team, and we've raised over $1,000 so far. But if you go on Movember.com and search, there's a little search bar for Shakopee, you'll come up with a bunch of, and the school district has a bunch of folks who are participating as well, and I just know there are a lot of guys in Shakopee who are growing mustaches, and I cannot wait to shave mine off in 10 days. So
Actually, technically, we're not growing mustaches, we're just shaving them off every morning.
See,
absolutely.
We're just not shaving them off.
You're right.
I think Ronco has a product
Starting
to
something.
fix yours. So.
Right. Well. All right. Item number 13. Motion to adjourn to Tuesday, December 4th, 2012 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Councilor Whiting, do we have a second? Seconded by Councilor Clay. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned at 9:24. Thank you, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And happy Thanksgiving.